Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're rocketing into space exploration. Well, not planets or galaxies exactly, more like, man, we're looking at how one space agency is tackling its online presence. Or, well, maybe how it isn't.
Definitely an interesting area to explore. It's more than just how things look, right? There's this whole question of how organizations, especially ones doing such complex work, connect with the public, secure funding, and get their message out there.
Right. And it all started with you, our listeners. One of you wrote in, kind of puzzled about why ISRO's, website, their Instagram, it all feels a bit, shall we say, retro,
Yeah.
especially compared to, say, NASA. They always seem to have something flashy going on online.
Yeah, you've hit on something that's got people talking. I mean, the way things look does matter, but
Yeah.
it's tricky because what's appealing is subjective, you
Yeah.
know? Maybe ISRO is going for a minimalist vibe on purpose. It might not be about lacking good design, but more about different priorities. Right?
Yeah, interesting. Though, reading through comments online, a lot of folks seem to agree. ISRO's online presence feels kind of stuck in the early internet days, especially compared to NASA's sleek and modern style. People were saying NASA makes you want to learn more, while ISRO's content doesn't quite hit that wow factor.
That wow factor, that's what gets people hooked, especially in science communication. But here's a thought. What if ISRO is all about face-to-face interaction instead of flashy online stuff?
Like they're out there building relationships instead of racking up likes.
Exactly. I've heard from researchers who've worked directly with ISRO, and they say ISRO is super engaged with universities, industry partners, building those real-world connections. Maybe that's more their style.
Fascinating. See, this is why I love a good deep dive. Gets you thinking differently. And speaking of different approaches, one commenter, they go by Sparkling Prani online.
Catchy name.
Right. Anyway, they were all about ISRO's direct engagement, saying it's way more impactful than any social media buzz.
And it might be a brilliant strategy. Think about it. When ISRO makes news, it's usually for achieving something big, right? A launch, a mission milestone, something concrete.
They let their actions speak for themselves.
Exactly. By the time it hits social media, it's old news. So maybe, just maybe, they're playing a different game altogether.
And Sparkling Punny made another point. This approach actually creates space for science communicators outside of ISRO to jump in to make their work accessible to a wider audience.
That's a really interesting idea, almost like a challenge to all those science enthusiasts out there. Come and tell ISRO's story to the world.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, whose job is it to make science go viral? Should it be ISRO's responsibility to be on TikTok? Or should they focus on space exploration and let others handle the social media side of things?
Definitely something to think about.
Totally. Okay, so we've got ISRO potentially choosing a show, don't tell strategy,
Yeah.
independent science communicators fill in the gaps. But then there's the whole funding side of things, right? Because let's be real, space exploration isn't cheap. Rockets, satellites, all that cutting-edge tech, it needs funding, which often relies on public support, on people understanding and valuing their work.
Absolutely. Public perception can make or break a space program. A strong online presence can get people excited, build support, and ultimately attract more resources. And remember that stat about ISRO only receiving a tiny fraction of the GDP, something like 0.04%?
Yeah, I saw that. Pretty wild.
Right. So could a little social media savvy help bridge that gap? It's certainly a question worth considering.
Definitely. I even saw one commenter bringing up Parivahan Soa, that government website, as an example of a decent website. Emphasis on decent.
Okay, yeah, I'll admit Indian government websites aren't exactly known for their amazing user experience.
Right.
But I do want to challenge this idea that everything has to be flashy and animated to be good. A website can be straightforward, packed with info, easy to use, without being super fancy.
Totally.
It's all about finding that balance.
So we've got this potential show, don't tell strategy, independent science communicators in the mix, and all these financial implications. This is already more complex than I imagined.
We're just scratching the surface. There's a lot more to uncover.
We're back, still orbiting the mystery of ISRO's online presence. It's like they're playing a game of Where's Waldo with the digital world.
Right. Like they're out there, but not exactly front and center.
Exactly. And remember that commenter who'd rather get insights straight from ISRO's chairman than scroll through their Twitter feed?
I do, yeah. What about them?
Well, that got me thinking maybe ISRO's real story isn't online at all.
Interesting.
Like maybe they're so laser focused on the actual science, on launching rockets and exploring space, that crafting the perfect Instagram post just isn't a priority.
You've hit on something important, their dedication to tangible results. In a world obsessed with appearances, that's kind of refreshing, wouldn't you say?
It is, but it's also a bit of a head scratcher, right?
Yeah.
Because how do you inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers if they don't even know what you're doing?
That's the million-dollar question. We live in an age where attention is precious, so if ISRO wants to get young people excited about space, maybe they need to find ways to make their work more accessible, relatable.
Right. And that takes us back to the commenter who talked about science communicators filling the gap. Maybe ISRO's strength is in the actual exploration, the groundbreaking work, and then letting skilled communicators translate that for a wider audience.
No, that's a winning strategy, playing to your strengths and collaborating with others. And it brings us to another point that a lot of commenters brought up: funding.
Ah, yes, because rockets don't launch on good vibes alone, right?
Exactly. Space exploration needs money, which usually comes from government funding, which in turn often depends on public support. People need to understand and value what ISRO is doing.
It's all connected.
Right. A strong public image can lead to more funding, which leads to more exploration. And remember, we're talking about ISRO getting a tiny sliver of the GDP.
Yeah, like 0.04%, right? That's
Yeah.
almost statistically insignificant.
It's a drop in the bucket. So could better communication, a stronger online presence, actually translate into more financial support for ISRO? It's worth considering.
It really is. It's all about telling that story, making people care, right?
Yeah.
And that got me thinking about those iconic images of the Apollo missions.
Oh, absolutely. The ones with the astronauts walking on the moon.
Exactly. Those weren't just happy accidents. They were part of a deliberate strategy to capture people's imaginations.
They knew the power of visual storytelling, and ISRO has such incredible achievements to share. Imagine the impact if they combine their work with equally compelling storytelling and visuals.
It could be a game changer.
Yeah.
But then it's a fine line, isn't it? Showcasing your accomplishments without, coming across as arrogant.
That's always a challenge. But here's the thing. Sharing your success doesn't have to be bragging. It can be about inspiring others, showing what's possible when we push boundaries.
Right, it's about getting people excited, making them feel like they're part of something bigger.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe ISRO is already doing that in ways we haven't even considered. We've been so focused on their online presence or lack thereof that we haven't even touched on their offline engagement.
Oh, that's true. Do they have educational programs, partnerships with schools? There's a whole other side to explore.
Right. It's a good reminder that there's always more to the story than what we see on the surface.
So much more to uncover. Okay, so we're back, ready to wrap up this deep dive into ISRO and their, shall we say, unique approach to the digital world.
Unique is one way to put it.
Right. We've talked about their minimalist online style, the whole science communication puzzle, the funding question. But I feel like there's one more layer we need to peel back before we sign off.
Another layer. Okay, I'm listening.
So the cultural context thing. We
Yeah.
keep comparing ISRO to NASA, but they operate in totally different worlds.
Right, different countries, different histories, different everything.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, ISRO's online presence is perfectly aligned with how their main audience in India expects them to communicate.
It's definitely something to consider. We can get so caught up in our own online bubbles that we forget how diverse the world is.
Totally. Plus, let's not forget, ISRO has accomplished some seriously impressive stuff, even with a website that looks like it's from the 90s and a Twitter feed that's quieter than a library.
You're right. They've sent missions to the moon, to Mars. They've got their own satellite navigation system up and running. They're not messing around.
It makes you wonder if their whole actions speak louder than words. Approach is kind of genius.
It's refreshing, that's for sure. In a world that's all about hype and self-promotion, ISRO is out here proving that you can make groundbreaking achievements without constantly shouting about it from the rooftops.
Substance over style. Maybe that's the real takeaway here.
It could be, or maybe, as we've been discussing, they could amplify their impact even more by bringing in some of those communication strategies, sharing their journey with a wider audience.
It's a fascinating dilemma, right? Like,
Yeah.
do they need to change, or are they onto something special just the way they are?
Exactly. There's no easy answer.
And that's what makes this so interesting. It all comes down to values, priorities, and understanding your audience.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, dear listener, where does this leave you? You've heard the arguments, you've explored the complexities. Now it's time to form your own opinion. Is ISRO's low-key online presence a breath of fresh air or a missed opportunity? It's up to you to decide.
And whatever you decide, keep that curiosity alive. There's a whole universe out there, both online and off, just waiting to be explored.